I was sitting across from a $340 million pension fund manager, explaining why our restructuring strategy would protect 14,000 retirement accounts, when my phone buzzed with a calendar invite, mandatory meeting effective immediately, not from my managing director, not from anyone on my team, from Cassidy Whitmore, the founder's 9-year-old daughter who'd been running our social media account for 6 months and somehow just got promoted to chief strategy officer. That meeting ended my 1-year career at Whitmore Capital in 11 minutes flat. But here's what Cassidy didn't understand about wealth management when you've personally guided families through recessions, market crashes, and generational wealth transfers for 2 decades. Those clients don't belong to a logo on a building. They belong to the person who answered the phone at 2 a.m. when the markets were bleeding. My name is Grant Ellison. At 53, I'd spent more than half my life inside the walls of Whitmore Capital Management, a boutique investment advisory firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. Arthur Whitmore built it from nothing in 1981, turning a 2-person office on South Tryon Street into one of the most respected independent wealth management firms in the Southeast. $1.2 billion in assets under management, 43 high net worth families, a reputation so solid that people waited on a referral list just to become clients. I started as a junior analyst at 32, fresh off a rough stint at a bulge bracket bank in New York, where I'd learned 2 things: how markets actually worked and how much I hated being treated like a spreadsheet. Arthur hired me because I asked the right question during my interview. Instead of talking about alpha generation or portfolio optimization, I asked him what kept his clients up at night. He leaned back in that old leather chair of his and said, "Grant, you're the first person I've interviewed in 3 years who understands this isn't about money. It's about fear." That moment changed everything. Over 21 years, I climbed from analyst to senior portfolio manager to director of client relations. I managed relationships with 31 of our 43 client families personally. Not the transactional kind where you send a quarterly report and hope nobody calls. The kind where you sit in Margaret Chen's living room after her husband passes and explain what happens to their trust. The kind where you drive to David Holcomb's lake house on a Saturday because he's panicking about a market correction and needs someone to look him in the eye and say, "Your grandchildren's college fund is safe." I built it to survive exactly this. My retention rate over 21 years was 97%. I'd lost exactly 1 client, and that was because they moved to Portugal. They still called me every quarter for advice anyway. That Tuesday morning started normally enough. Coffee from the place on East Boulevard that Arthur and I had been going to since 2006. Desk by 7:15. Review of the Henderson family's estate, restructuring a $47 million portfolio that needed rebalancing after their patriarch's recent passing. Delicate work, the kind that required understanding not just tax law and investment strategy, but family dynamics. 2 sons who didn't speak to each other. A daughter-in-law convinced her husband was being cheated out of his inheritance. A 91-year-old widow who just wanted to make sure her great-grandchildren could go to college. I'd spent 4 months building a restructuring plan that kept the family from tearing itself apart. The final presentation to the Henderson family was scheduled for Thursday, 2 days away. The calendar invite from Cassidy arrived at 10:47 a.m. Look, I'd been watching this train wreck approach for months. Arthur Whitmore had stepped back 18 months ago after a health scare, mild stroke, enough to frighten him into what he called a transitional retirement. His son Nathan, who'd been Arthur's logical successor and our managing director for 12 years, had left the firm 2 years earlier after a bitter dispute about the company's direction. That left a vacuum, and into that vacuum stepped Cassidy. Cassidy Whitmore had a communications degree from a private college in Virginia and 3 years of experience managing influencer campaigns for a cosmetics brand in Miami. She'd returned to Charlotte 8 months ago because, according to the firm newsletter, she wanted to bring her passion for brand storytelling to the family business. What that actually meant was that she'd burned through the trust fund money Arthur had set aside for her and needed a paycheck. Her boyfriend, Jake Parsons, arrived 2 months after she did. He had a certificate in digital asset strategy from an online program and a podcast about cryptocurrency with 400 subscribers. Arthur, in his diminished capacity, had approved Jake's hiring as a technology integration consultant. His salary was $185,000. He spent most of his time in the conference room watching market commentary videos on his laptop with the volume up. I walked into the corner office that used to smell like Arthur's pipe tobacco and old books. Cassidy had gutted it. The mahogany bookshelves were gone, replaced by a neon sign that said "Disrupt Everything" in cursive. The framed photographs of Arthur with 3 governors, 2 senators, and Warren Buffett at a charity dinner had been replaced by abstract art that looked like someone had sneezed paint onto canvas. Cassidy was sitting cross-legged on a beanbag chair, an actual beanbag chair in the office of the chief strategy officer of a firm managing $1.2 billion. Jake was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "Grant, hi." She said it like we were meeting at a brunch. "Sit down. We need to chat about your role going forward." There was no chair. She'd replaced the client chairs with floor cushions. "I'll stand." "What's going on?" "So, Jake and I have been doing a deep dive into our client experience metrics, and honestly, the vibe is super outdated. Our brand voice is giving, like, 2005 energy. We need people who understand the modern wealth narrative." The modern wealth narrative. Our clients had an average net worth of $28 million and an average age of 64. They didn't want a narrative. They wanted their money protected. "I'm not sure I follow." Cassidy. "Our client satisfaction scores are the highest they've been in." "It's not about satisfaction scores, Grant." She waved her hand dismissively. "It's about disruption readiness. The wealth space is evolving. AI-driven portfolio management, social-first client engagement, tokenized assets. Jake has a whole vision for transitioning our client base into digital-forward strategies." Jake looked up from his phone long enough to nod. "Huge opportunity in the crypto-adjacent space. Cassidy, our clients have pension obligations, estate plans, trust structures. Many of them have spent decades. This is exactly what I'm talking about." She stood up from the beanbag, which took a moment. "Legacy thinking. Grant, you've been great. Honestly, like, really great. But the firm needs a new energy. Today's your last day." She said it like she was canceling a subscription. My chest went tight. I looked at Jake, who was back on his phone, then back at Cassidy, who was holding out a manila folder like it was a takeout menu. "Non-disclosure agreement, non-compete clause, and will honor your severance through the end of the quarter. 3 months. Jake will handle the transition of your accounts starting tomorrow." Jake, the man who last week had asked our compliance officer what a fiduciary duty was. The man who thought rebalancing a portfolio meant buying whatever's trending on Reddit. Jake isn't a registered investment advisor. He can't legally manage client assets or provide financial advice. That's federal law, not company policy. "We're working on that," Jake said without looking up. "Got an application in." An application. To become a registered advisor, a process that takes months of study, examination, and background checks. And they were planning to hand him $1.2 billion in client assets tomorrow. Cassidy's smile tightened. "Grant, the NDA is non-negotiable. You talk to any clients, any competitors, any media, and we'll pursue legal action. My father's firm has resources you don't." Her father's firm, not hers. I noticed she still called it that. I took the folder. Not because I was beaten, but because I needed time to think. I had my attorney review it that evening. He found what I expected: the non-compete was overly broad, likely unenforceable under North Carolina law, especially given that my termination was without cause. The NDA restricted me from discussing proprietary investment strategies and client information, which was standard. But it couldn't prevent clients from contacting me independently. I signed a modified version that my attorney negotiated kept the NDA intact, narrowed the non-compete to direct solicitation only, extended severance to 4 months. Cassidy agreed to everything without reading it. She just wanted me gone. I packed my office in 2 hours. 21 years reduced to 4 banker's boxes. My CFA charter certificate. My framed photo with Arthur from the night we crossed $1 billion in AUM. The handwritten client notes that couldn't be replicated by any algorithm. My daughter Megan's crayon drawing from when she was 6, now yellowed and curling at the edges. "Daddy is the best money helper." Walking through the lobby for the last time, I passed the portrait of Arthur Whitmore that hung above the reception desk. I swear his painted eyes looked apologetic. I didn't go home. I drove to Freedom Park, sat on a bench by the lake, and stared at the water until the sun started setting. Then I called my ex-wife Karen. "I need to talk to you about something before Megan hears it from someone else." "What happened?" "I lost my job today." Long pause. "Grant, what about Megan's tuition?" My daughter was in her 2nd year at Duke. $62,000 a year. My son, Tyler, was starting at UNC Chapel Hill in the fall. $24,000 for in-state, plus housing. My mother's memory care facility in Pineville was $4,000, $800 a month. Alimony payments to Karen until I turned 60. A mortgage on the house I'd bought when I still believed I'd retire from Whitmore Capital. I'll figure it out. I always do. But sitting in that car afterward, watching the sky turn purple over the Charlotte skyline, I wasn't sure I would. For the first time in 21 years, I had no title, no office, no team, and no income beyond 4 months of severance. At 53, in a city where everyone in finance knew everyone, word would spread fast, and Cassidy would make sure it spread her way. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and did what I'd done for every client facing a crisis. I made a plan. First, I took inventory. My personal contacts, not Whitmore's CRM database, but the actual phone numbers, personal emails, and relationships I'd built over 2 decades. 31 families who trusted me, who called me on holidays, who'd invited me to weddings and funerals and graduation parties. Those relationships lived in my phone, my memory, and the trust I'd earned through thousands of hours of careful, personal attention. Second, my professional network, the Charlotte chapter of the CFA Society, where I'd served on the board for 8 years. The Southeastern Wealth Management Forum, where I'd been a keynote speaker twice. The Wednesday morning group at Quail Hollow Club, 6 senior financial advisors who'd been meeting for breakfast for 14 years. Every one of them would hear about my departure within days. Third, and this was the hardest part, patience. I would not contact a single client, not one. I would not violate any agreement, give Cassidy any ammunition, or do anything that could be framed as solicitation. If this was going to work, the clients had to come to me. I gave myself 45 days of silence. Those 45 days nearly broke me. Week 1, 3 former colleagues texted me, all saying the same thing. Jake had walked into the Monday morning team meeting wearing a hoodie and announced that all client communications would now go through a new engagement platform he'd found online, a glorified chatbot. For clients who'd been receiving personal phone calls from me for decades. Week 2, my phone rang at 6 a.m. on a Wednesday. Margaret Chen, the 78-year-old widow whose $31 million trust I'd managed for 9 years after her husband's death. Grant, I know you're not at the firm anymore, but I need your advice. Not as my advisor, as my friend. Something is wrong. Margaret, I can't discuss specific account details, but what's troubling you? I received an email from the firm suggesting I move 40% of my late husband's trust into something called a tokenized real estate fund. Grant, I don't even know what that means. Richard and I built that money over 50 years. It's supposed to take care of our grandchildren. My blood went cold. A tokenized real estate fund, an unregistered, illiquid, high-risk instrument being recommended to a 7-8-year-old widow with a conservative income mandate. If this was Jake's idea of modernization, he was going to get people financially destroyed and potentially face federal securities violations. Margaret, I can't advise you on that specific recommendation, but I can tell you, as your friend, that before making any changes to an estate plan your husband spent 30 years building, you should get an independent second opinion. From a registered advisor who specializes in estate preservation. She paused. Will you be that advisor, Grant? Not yet. But soon. That call was the first crack. But the dam didn't break until week 3. David Holcomb called me on a Saturday morning, his voice shaking. David was 71. His family's manufacturing business had generated $86 million in personal wealth over 3 generations, all managed through Whitmore Capital. He'd trusted me to protect it because I'd guided him through the 2008 crash, the 2020 pandemic sell-off, and his contentious divorce without losing a dime of principal. Grant, I just got a margin call on my account, the account that you specifically structured to never use margin. I felt the floor drop out. David, I'm going to need you to take a breath and tell me exactly what you see on your statement. Someone, Jake, it turned out, had restructured David's conservative, income-generating portfolio into a leveraged position heavy on cryptocurrency ETFs and speculative tech stocks. In 3 weeks, the portfolio had lost $11 million in value, and now the brokerage was calling margin. I spent 2 hours on the phone with David that Saturday. Not as his advisor, I was careful about that, but as his friend. I walked him through the steps to unwind the margin position, recommended he contact a securities attorney immediately, and suggested he file a complaint with FINRA. By week 4, I was getting 2 or 3 calls a day. Each one followed the same devastating pattern. Jake and Cassidy were systematically dismantling conservative, carefully constructed portfolios and replacing them with high-risk, high-fee, speculative strategies. They'd moved an 8, 3-year retired surgeon into emerging market derivatives. They'd shifted a family foundation's endowment into a private crypto fund that Jake's college roommate managed. They'd restructured a college savings trust for a client's 4 grandchildren into leveraged tech positions. The compliance officer, Patricia Vance, resigned in week 3. She later told me she'd filed a whistleblower complaint with the SEC before she left. Week 5 brought the moment I almost lost everything. Cassidy found out that clients were calling me. I don't know who told her, but suddenly my phone rang with a Charlotte number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Ellison, this is Rebecca Thornton from Whitmore Capital's outside counsel. We have evidence that you've been in contact with firm clients in violation of your non-disclosure and non-solicitation agreements. We're prepared to seek an emergency injunction and pursue damages in excess of $2 million. My stomach dropped. $2 million. I had 4 months of severance, a mortgage, 2 kids' tuition, and my mother's care facility. A lawsuit of that magnitude would drain me financially even if I won. I called my attorney within minutes. He reviewed everything, my phone records, my emails, my texts. Every single contact had been initiated by the client, not by me. Every conversation had been explicitly limited to personal advice between friends. I'd been meticulous about this precisely because I'd anticipated it. But the threat was real. Cassidy was willing to spend her father's money to bury me. For 3 nights, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my kitchen running numbers, calculating how long my savings would last if I had to fight a protracted legal battle while unemployed, paying alimony, tuition, and medical care. Tyler called me that Thursday. "Dad, you okay?" Mom said. "You sounded weird on the phone." "I'm fine, buddy. Just working through some career stuff." "Dad, I know it's more than that." Megan told me what happened. "Look, if tuition is an issue, I can defer a semester, get a job, help out. My 18-year-old son, offering to put his education on hold to help me." Something in my chest cracked open. "Tyler, you're starting Chapel Hill in the fall. That's not negotiable. Your old man's got this figured out." I didn't, not yet. But that call reminded me why I'd spent 21 years protecting other people's families. Because protecting families was the only thing I'd ever really known how to do. My attorney sent a response to Whitmore's counsel that laid out 3 facts. 1, every client contact was inbound. 2, no proprietary information was discussed. 3, pursuing a frivolous injunction against a terminated employee for receiving phone calls would itself constitute harassment and could trigger counterclaims. They backed off within 48 hours. But those 48 hours aged me 5 years. Day 46. One day, past my self-imposed silence period, I updated my LinkedIn profile to independent wealth advisor, accepting select clients. No mention of Whitmore, no solicitation, just a signal. The first call came within 20 minutes. Richard Stowe, chairman of Stowe Industries, $94 million under management at Whitmore. "Grant, I've been waiting for this. Where do I sign?" By the end of that first week, I'd received calls from 19 families, 19 out of 31. Each one told me the same story: deteriorating service, reckless investment changes, inability to reach anyone competent at the firm. Margaret Chen had pulled her entire trust after discovering that Jake had moved $4 million of her late husband's money into the crypto fund without her explicit written authorization. David Holcomb had filed a formal FINRA complaint and was pursuing arbitration for his $11 million in losses. The second week brought 4 more families, then 3 more. Then the institutional clients started calling the 2 pension funds and the corporate endowment that represented nearly 30% of Whitmore's assets under management. I needed infrastructure. I couldn't manage $800 million in client assets from my kitchen table. I called Raymond Torres, a compliance attorney I'd known for 15 years. Then I called Susan Park, a former Whitmore operations manager who'd been quietly let go by Cassidy in month 2 for not aligning with the new culture. Then I called Arthur Whitmore. That was the hardest call. "Arthur, it's Grant." Long silence. I heard him breathing. The stroke had slowed him down, but Arthur's mind was still sharp enough to understand what was happening to his firm. "I know why you're calling, Grant." His voice was smaller than I remembered. "And I know I should have stopped this. I didn't call to blame you. You should. I handed my life's work to someone who thinks finance is a content strategy, because she's my daughter and I couldn't say no. And now everything I built is disappearing. Arthur, I didn't call about Cassidy. I called because I need your advice. I'm setting up my own practice, and I want to do it right, the way you taught me." He was quiet for a long time. Then he gave me the name of a custodial firm, a compliance framework, and 40 minutes of the best business advice I'd ever received. At the end, his voice cracked. Take care of my clients, Grant. They deserve someone who remembers that this business is about people, not platforms. 6 weeks after launching Ellison Wealth Advisory from a modest office on Moorhead Street, I had transitioned 27 of my 31 original client families, $847 million in assets under management. Susan was running operations. Raymond had built a compliance infrastructure that would have made the SEC proud. 2 junior advisors from Whitmore, both excellent professionals who'd been sidelined by Cassidy's cultural reset, joined me in month 2. The Wednesday breakfast group at Quail Hollow had turned into my informal board of advisors. Jim Hartley, who ran the largest RIA in the Carolinas, kept shaking his head every time new information surfaced about Whitmore's implosion. Grant, I've been in this business for 35 years. I've never seen a firm destroy itself this fast. It's like watching someone set fire to a house while standing inside it. He wasn't exaggerating. FINRA had opened a formal investigation after receiving complaints from 8 separate clients. The SEC's examination division had launched a review based on the whistleblower complaint. 3 families had filed arbitration claims totaling $34 million in losses. And Cassidy's response to all of it was to hire a crisis PR firm and post Instagram stories about weathering the storm of change. The end came on a Thursday morning, 4 months after Cassidy had fired me. I was reviewing Margaret Chen's reconstructed trust portfolio safely back in investment-grade bonds and blue-chip dividend stocks, where it belonged, when Susan knocked on my door. Channel 9 is calling. Whitmore Capital just had their advisory license suspended by the State Securities Division, pending full investigation. I turned on the TV in our small conference room. The anchor was reading from what appeared to be an official statement. Cassidy was standing outside the Whitmore Capitol building on South Tryon Street, flanked by attorneys. She was wearing a blazer that still had the price tag visible on the sleeve. The confident energy was gone. She looked like what she was, a 9-year-old in over her head, watching her father's legacy turn to dust. A reporter asked about the client losses. Another asked about the SEC investigation. A third asked about Jake Parsons, who had apparently disappeared from Charlotte entirely, deactivating his social media accounts and leaving his apartment lease unpaid. Cassidy made the same mistake Bryce would have made. She stopped and tried to explain. This is a witch hunt, orchestrated by a disgruntled former employee who couldn't adapt to innovation. My father's firm will survive this because we believe in the future of finance. A reporter followed up immediately. Miss Whitmore, are you referring to Grant Ellison, who now manages nearly $850 million for your former clients? Can you comment on why 27 of your 31 major client families chose to leave? She had no answer. The camera caught her mouth opening and closing, searching for words that wouldn't come. I turned off the TV. There was no satisfaction in watching it. Arthur Whitmore had spent 43 years building something meaningful, and his daughter had reduced it to a cautionary tale in 4 months. That wasn't victory. That was tragedy. The following week, Arthur called me one last time. Grant, the state is shutting us down permanently. I've spent the last 3 days in meetings with regulators, and there's nothing left to save. I'm sorry, Arthur. I truly am. Don't be sorry. Be proud. You did what I should have done. You put the clients first, every single time. That's what I built this firm to do. And you're the one who's actually doing it. His voice steadied. I have one last favor to ask. The 4 remaining families who stayed with the firm. They're going to need someone. Will you take care of them? Send me their information. I'll call each one personally today. I know you will. That's why they'll say yes. 8 months after being fired, I stood in our new office. We'd moved to a larger space on South Boulevard to accommodate the team. 23 client families from Whitmore, plus 4 more that Arthur had personally asked me to take on, plus 11 new families who'd heard about us through referrals. $1.1 billion in assets under management. 12 employees. A compliance record so clean that our FINRA examiner had actually complimented us during the routine audit. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan. Dad, got an A on my finance midterm. Professor used your firm's client retention rate as a case study. Is that weird? Another from David Holcomb. Grant, the arbitration settled. Full recovery plus damages. Margaret and I are taking our grandkids to dinner tonight to celebrate. You should join us, your family. And one more, from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Ellison, this is Jake Parsons. I know I have no right to ask, but I'm trying to get back on my feet. I've enrolled in a legitimate financial planning program. Would you consider letting me interview for a junior analyst position? I understand if the answer is no. I stared at that last message for a long time. Then I typed back, finish the program, pass the Series 65, then call me. Everyone deserves a second chance when they're willing to actually earn it. I set the phone down and looked out the window. The Charlotte skyline was the same one I'd been looking at for 21 years, but it looked different now. Not because anything had changed out there, but because something had changed in here. Cassidy Whitmore had taught me the most important lesson of my career, and it had nothing to do with finance. Competence without a title is still competence. A title without competence is just a costume. And the relationships you build by showing up, being honest, and doing the hard work, those don't belong to any firm. They belong to the person who earned them. At 53, I wasn't just recovering from being fired. I was building something better than what I'd lost. Not out of revenge, not out of spite. Out of the simple, stubborn belief that if you take care of people, they'll take care of you right back. The Wednesday morning breakfasts at Quail Hollow continued. Margaret Chen's grandchildren's college fund was growing steadily. David Holcomb's portfolio was fully rebuilt. And every morning, I still got my coffee from the same place on East Boulevard, except now, I owned the walk from the car to the office. That's what 21 years of trust looks like. Not a logo, not a building, not a title someone's daddy gave them. Just the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you earned every single relationship you have. And nobody, not a founder's daughter, not her podcast boyfriend, not a neon sign that says disrupt everything can take that away from you.
They say just forget. Move on like it's easy. But forgetting you feels like remembering someone I've never seen. I've been trying to erase you from the places in my mind, but the harder that I fight it, the more you're hard to leave behind. Every memory keeps slipping through the cracks I try to close, like a face I should remember, but somehow never know. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. Every moment turns to fragments, every thought just fades to blue, like I'm searching for a feeling that still only leads to you. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. But now every empty moment still reminds me what is real. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. Don't pity me. My heart doesn't need your mercy. can still stand on my own. I was broken by your leaving, fell deeper than I thought I would. But pain has taught me how to heal now and survive what once I couldn't. You don't have to look back sadly, don't reach out with guilty hands. What you shattered made me stronger. Now I rise where I once collapsed. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow, I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling, I'll learn to breathe again. I once begged for your affection, now I've learned my worth in scars. And the man you left in pieces found his own way through the dark. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow, I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling, I'll learn to breathe again. Begun. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow, I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling, I'll rise alone again. I'll rise alone again.